What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing Godzilla-Thon episode 33. This is for Godzilla 2014. So, this was my very first Godzilla movie in the movie theaters. Obviously, it was the first US Godzilla movie since the 98 movie, and it was really a chance for America to redeem themselves when making Godzilla movies. By this point, Godzilla had been dead for 10 years. They hadn't made a new movie for 10 years. I'm not going to, I'm not going to cover Godzilla's cameo in Always Sunset on 3rd Street or whatever it's called, because that's just not important. But Godzilla has been gone for multiple years now, and he's making his return to the big screen from America, and it's the first time I ever get to see a Godzilla movie in theaters. Now, when this movie came out, it was May 16th, and I remember that day so well because at my school we had like this Greek fair kind of thing. It was basically a fair that the 7th graders would put on, and they'd get to run it, and then after the fair, you would go, you just go home. That was basically, if you were a 7th grader, that was your day, was you went to like the gym, you'd set up, and then after you set up, you just wait for a while, and then all the other kids, the 8th graders and the 6th graders would come in, and then they'd do whatever your fair activity was. So people had like Minotaur mazes and everything like that, and I made this elaborate Hydra. It wasn't actually a Hydra. I think the character that I chose to represent at the fair was like this dragon called Layden or something like that. But I picked it for a very specific reason, because Hercules was the one who killed Layden, and Hercules was the one who I had just read fight Godzilla. Like, around this time was when I got Marvel's Godzilla issue, whatever I got, like 3rd issue or something, and in it, Hercules fights Godzilla, and he loses, so I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have someone who fights Godzilla in my fair activity, because why not? It's the day Godzilla comes out, and we did the fair, it was great, and then after school I got out, but my dad he was caught up at work, he had to work late, and I was destroyed. I thought I was not going to be able to get to 2014 in time. It was that Friday night, and I didn't think I was going to get to go watch the movie, and I was so mad. Like, how could that happen of all days? But luckily, he was able to get off work, and he came by and picked me up from the school. And we went to the theater that night, and it was pretty late by the time we got there. We saw a pretty late showing of the movie, but we got to see the last showing of the day for Godzilla 2014, and it was awesome. I loved it so much. At the time, it was my favorite Godzilla movie ever. Obviously, that's changed after the hype died down a little bit. I just loved the movie, and I still love it. And I went back and saw it multiple more times. I do hold the record for the most times I've ever viewed a movie in theaters, with Kong Skull Island, with around 6 or 7 times in the theaters to watch that movie, and then right after that would be Shin Godzilla, with around 4 or 5 times I saw it. This movie I saw 2 or 3 times in theaters, but back then that was a lot for me. That was still a lot. So starting out the movie, actually initially when the movie starts out and you get this this Project Monarch opening, which obviously is not what it's called, that's the name for the Kong Skull Island intro. This one's called, like, I don't know, the Pacific or something, map of the Pacific. But when the opening starts out, I rather didn't like it. I thought I was not going to like the movie at all, because although the trailers had me really hyped up and I was super excited, it was Godzilla back on the big screen, this intro is very reminiscent of Godzilla 1998, and back then I was in that phase where I had realized only a few years prior how bad that movie is as a Godzilla movie, so I was in that kind of time frame when I just couldn't appreciate anything about it, and when this movie started out, immediately I was like, oh, really? The music's reminiscent of the 98 movie, the whole intro, the beginning scene here is reminiscent of the 98 movie. I was like, how could this happen? Like, how could America do it again? They're ruining it again. I was totally wrong. They definitely didn't. Despite what some people in the comments on this video may say, guarantee at least one person, Bloodborne, is going to say that they don't like this movie, but it's a good movie. I do like it. It's just this intro, when I very first saw it, really made me go, wait a minute, this movie is gonna suck after all. And 5 minutes into the movie, I was already changing my mind. So the intro starts out, Project Monarch. It's very cool. We start with footage in 1954 of Godzilla's first, I guess, quote-unquote first, because this has been retconned in Kong Skull Island's continuity. But for this movie alone, the first appearance of Godzilla in 1954, Godzilla swimming around through the ocean, which, fantastic. It looks so good seeing all these natives looking on their island, looking out, and Godzilla swimming over in the ocean. You just see these massive dorsal fins going through the ocean. He just has a real sense of scale. Dorsal fins are actually too small in this design, in my opinion. They need to be a bit longer, but you don't really get a sense of how unproportional they are during this sequence. So this scene's just awesome. Godzilla lands on the island Bikini Atoll, and he's hit by the Castle Bravo atomic bomb in 1954. This is the last time Godzilla's seen. Pretty awesome. So great way to start the movie. We cut to 1999, and a mine collapses in the Philippines. Dr. Serizawa, pretty much this is the point when I was like, wait, never mind, this movie's going to be awesome. We are introduced to Ken Watanabe's character, Dr. Serizawa, and the second I heard his name, I had heard rumors leading up to the movie that that's who he was going to be playing, but I was like, whatever, that's not true. The second they said his name, I was just like, oh yes, like finally we're getting some Easter eggs, some great Godzilla references. So Dr. Serizawa and his assistant Dr. Graham investigate this whole collapsed mine situation, which in the novelization, I'm not here to talk about the novelization. That'll probably be its own review some other day, not part of Godzilla-Thon. But in the novelization, this sequence is done a lot better. It's a lot more eerie. You get some investigations where Serizawa is interviewing these radiation victims from the mine. They're down there in the mine, and Graham snaps a picture or something like that, and it just reveals these dead bodies crashed in the cave. So it's a lot darker of a subject matter in the novelization. The novelization is kind of what a lot of us thought this movie was gonna be, which was a return to the 54 form. It was gonna be this very dark, scary movie, and it was gonna be very emotional. Godzilla 2014 doesn't actually wind up being as much of that very emotional in terms of scary and just depressing mood that a lot of us thought it was and wanted it to be. It winds up being more emotional as in a family drama. So it was kind of a little bit of false advertising. The advertising campaign for this movie probably is what, in retrospect, makes me have the dislike for this movie that I have, which, as you'll see, is not a lot. But the advertising campaign for this movie was absolutely fantastic. And I know I'm kind of all over the place with this review, but that's because I have such a deep connection with Godzilla 2014. Unlike a lot of these other, like, previous Millennium movies that I've been talking about, it's like I have a couple memories associated with them, but nothing on the scale of this movie. So the advertising campaign for this movie, ever since the first teaser trailer came out, I became obsessed with Godzilla 2014 back in 2014 and 2013 era. So I was just absolutely obsessed with it. I could not stop watching the trailer over and over and over again. I wrote the dialogue down on paper, that whole, like, gentlemen, you were being sent in by Halo drop speech that's given in that teaser trailer. I found leaked Comic-Con footage online that I watched probably a million times. I was making YouTube playlists of it. I was basically just devoting my entire life to the advertising campaign for this movie. And the advertising campaign for this movie does two things simultaneously. Number one, it sets up the very dark 54 style tone with just Godzilla. That is key, because going into this movie, I was really hoping for, and it was kind of like a mixed thing, because it was, I was not totally at the point where I am now, where I appreciate the solo Godzilla movies more than I appreciate the ones when he's with other monsters, but back then I was really hoping for a 54 remake. But at the same time, I was like, this might be boring if it's a 54 remake. I already know how it ends. Plus, I don't want Godzilla to die. I want him to return for sequels. Plus, it would be cool to see him fighting other monsters. And, we knew that there was going to be Mutos in it. We saw that weird crab monster that was seen in the Now I Am Become Death Destroyer of Worlds teaser. That big red crab monster that doesn't actually appear in the movie. So we knew there was going to be other monsters in the movie, but we didn't know about the Mutos. We didn't know what they were. I knew there were monsters called Mutos in the movie because I watched ETN, but I had no idea that they were going to be, like, main villains. I thought that there was going to be, like, these monsters showed up up, and then we killed them, the military killed them, and now Godzilla's here. I thought that's how it was going to be. I just didn't expect that Godzilla was going to be fighting them. So I was just really excited for this kind of nationwide destruction that looked like it was going to be promised in the trailer. There was that very, I'd say, kind of misleading shot of the Statue of Liberty being all destroyed, and you're led to believe that Godzilla destroys the Statue of Liberty in the teaser trailer, but it was the small Statue of Liberty in Las Vegas that the Muto destroys, and you don't actually even see it in the movie. I don't know, I was very excited for a solo horror Godzilla movie, and another thing that the trailers did, the other simultaneous thing that it did, was hide Godzilla. You never saw Godzilla in all the teaser trailers, like that you'd see glimpses of him, little tiny glimpses of him, but that was it. That was all you got to see, and it really got me super excited because what does Godzilla look like? I have to see him. Then we got that car commercial. I think that came out before the movie where Godzilla's eating the Kias or whatever they are, and I lost my mind. I was like, oh my god, he looks amazing. I cannot wait for this movie. The movie comes out, and at first I was in love. I was like, whatever, I don't care that it's not a solo Godzilla movie. The Mutos are awesome. As time went on, I started to think, well, maybe the movie would have been better if it was just Godzilla. Maybe we would have gotten to know the characters on a personal level a little more. Maybe we would have cared for Ford Brody a little more instead of just caring for his father. Maybe we would have, just gotten the 54 movie that everyone wanted. Shin Godzilla helps clear a lot of that up, but it doesn't do what this movie looked like it was gonna do. This movie, I'd say the premise that I went into the movie with was a solo horror Godzilla movie directed by Gareth Edwards is better than Shin Godzilla could ever be. That's just personally how I feel. But that's just not the movie we got. Anyways, I forgot how I got off on this tangent. I just wanted to say that this movie, when it first came out, I was so in love with it that I thought it was like the greatest Godzilla movie ever. As time went on, I started to cool down and realize, maybe it could have been better, but it's still a good movie. And after a while, after Shin Godzilla came out, I'd say, I went back to this movie and was like, no, there's no point. This is a good movie. There's no point having just a solo Godzilla movie. This movie is fine on its own. It's great. But it's because of that really deep connection I have with this movie, remembering the advertising campaign and how obsessed with it I was, and how basically my phone was filled to the brim with 500 screenshots from every trailer that came out, and just how exciting of a time it was in my life. I've never seen a Godzilla movie in theaters before by this point, and so this was going to be my first chance to get to see Godzilla on screen. It was just really special, and so for that reason, this movie will, under no circumstances, ever fall out of my top 10 list of Godzilla movies. It will always be there in my top 10 list. Now, getting back into it, the skeleton of a massive unidentified terrestrial organism is found in a cave underground. This is our first hint to the Hollow Earth theory that will be played up upon a lot in Kong Skull Island. However, back at this point in 2014, we didn't know about the bigger universe of the MonsterVerse. 2 dormant spores are discovered in the tunnel. I should actually have said 1 dormant spore is discovered in the tunnel, the other one's ripped open, and it appears that something came right out of it. There's a great build-up as is revealed that something massive bust out of the side of this mountain and went straight into the ocean and headed straight for Gojira, Japan. I would have really liked to see the Muto's first stage, because what does it look like? We never get a chance to know what the spore stage looks like, and I've always been interested to know what it looks like. Is it just a smaller normal Muto? Who knows? I mean, it looks like the ones in the female Muto's egg are kind of normal looking, but why does it need to go back into stasis for so many years? It hatched, it's in this larval stage, and then it goes and hides out back in stasis for a few years, for 15 years. Meanwhile, the female Muto never needed to hatch at all until 2014, when she was ready to just burst out of her cocoon 300 feet tall. And, I do have some questions about how a 300-foot tall monster hung out inside of that nuclear cave, basically, in the mountainside in Nevada for so many years. That's unimportant. The important thing is that the Muto hatched, and I've always wanted to know what it looks like. But regardless, they head straight for Gojira, Japan. We are introduced to Joe Brody and his wife. They head straight for this nuclear plant where they work at. Joe's all paranoid because there's these graphs showing this earthquake, that the epicenter is somehow moving towards Japan. He's like, this isn't possible. It's aftershocks from the Philippines earthquake, sure, but how on earth is it getting closer to us? An earthquake hits the plant while Sandra is in the sublevels checking something that Joe told her to go check. And so she has to get out of there very quickly. There's a breach in the reactor as she's on her way out, and the plant starts to come down around everyone. Sandra's killed in one of the most emotional scenes of the entire movie, where Joe has to be the one to seal the containment doors, locking his wife in the nuclear radiation for all times. It's a very devastating scene, as you just have to see him sit there and he's waiting for her to run out, and he's just waiting and waiting and waiting, and she never comes. And the second he closes the door, that's when they get there. It was too late regardless. If he had kept the door open, the radiation would have been leaked out and exposed to the whole city, but there was nothing he could do about it. He had to close the door. It's just a shame that pretty much the minute after he closed it, they arrived. The full plant collapses. Joe escapes, but we don't actually see it on screen. Joe's son, Ford, witnesses the entire event from his school. That's also a great scene. I love the visuals of just having Ford looking out the window as you see the entire plant fall in on itself. We are told in the novelization that Joe just barely makes it out of there in a car with his friend, I think Takashi or something like that. Cut to 15 years later in San Francisco in 2014, when Ford Brody is arriving home from his tour in the Middle East. I don't know where he is from in the Middle East, like where he was stationed, but he's coming home from his time in the Middle East. He is an EOD technician, explosive ordnance disposal, for those of you who don't know what that means. His son Sam hardly knows him, and their estranged relationship isn't played up a lot in the movie. However, I like to keep going back to the novelization, and again, I really am not wanting to focus on the novelization. In the novelization, they do make a big deal out of the fact that his son barely knows who he is. Like, he doesn't even give him a hug when they first meet. But regardless, in the movie, that's just not seemingly the way it's played up. Sam, Ford's son, really seems to like Ford. Ford's wife, Elle, has had to take care of Sam all on her own for the past few years as Ford's been away, or at least the past, year or whatever. I don't know how long he was gone. Elle gets a call saying that Joe has been arrested in Japan for trespassing in the quarantine zone, so Ford has to head straight to Japan from San Francisco. Joe's apartment is covered head to toe in documents about the meltdown in Gojira, the 54 tests of the atomic bomb, something covered up in that whole situation, as well as documents linking all of that directly to Serizawa, which, how could they have not played up on this? This is one of the most interesting things they could have done in the movie, was have Joe confront Serizawa about, how could you do this? You killed my wife. Like, that kind of thing. How could they have not done this? This just seems like one of the biggest missed opportunities of the entire movie. Serizawa has clearly been found out by Joe. Joe knows everything. He knows that there was something going on in 1954 that was covered up by this organization. He has somehow linked the organization to the meltdown in Gojira in 1999. He knows this guy Serizawa is connected to it. He knows that there's a monster. He doesn't know it's a monster, but he knows there's some sort of animal being hidden inside the quarantine zone. He knows this from his bioacoustic studies, and we find out now he's studying echolocation. How could we have not had him confront Serizawa about all this? I don't understand the decision to kill Joe Brody, and I know that's a lot of people's big complaint, but honestly, it's a very warranted complaint. How do they not play up on one of the most interesting things in the entire movie? And that would have been the aspect of Joe knowing and probably hating Serizawa and being forced to work with him in order to take down the thing that killed his wife. Like, that would be such a cool subplot for the movie. But instead, Joe dies partway through, and then we're just left with Ford Brody, who we don't really get to know a lot about because he doesn't do a lot of expressing his emotions in this movie. He's just kind of like, all right, gotta get from point A to point B, and that's that. So, I don't know. It's crazy. There's a great scene when Joe breaks and starts crying as he agrees to come to America with Ford. The fantastic thing about this movie is the directing. The camera never settles down. I think every single shot in this movie is done from a handheld camera, so that the camera's always moving and giving you a very nice sense of just a movement. It's giving you a sense that everything's going very quickly, and we don't get too much of that in Godzilla movies. We do have some of that in Shin Godzilla, but that's more of like the camera's always cutting instead of always like shifting and moving like handheld style. And this is kind of what I expected from the American Death Note from 2017, the Netflix version from director Adam Weingard. However, that's definitely not what we got for that movie. The only reason I mention that is because If you go back and watch my review of that movie, I was just talking about how a lot of people leading up to that were just talking about how active the camera was in that movie. However, Gareth Edwards really puts everyone to shame because he always says his camera's moving. The next morning, Joe is headed out to the quarantine zone and he convinces Ford to come with him. Joe reveals that the Q zone is containing some sort of animal, but he doesn't quite know what's going on yet. I love the repetition here of whatever it takes, a quote from Joe hinting to his devotion of his family, and that's exactly why he's going back to the quarantine zone, is to find out what killed his wife after all. He's not going back there to be like, yeah, I'll check it out just because I want to. He's going back there because he feels responsible for what happens to his wife, and he wants to prove it to his son that he's not insane and that he was warranted in his worries. And also, there's a pretty cool scene later on in the movie when Ford repeats this line, whatever it takes, in reference to getting back home to his family. Joe finds the air in the quarantine zone to be non-radioactive, which makes him take off his gas mask and walk around normally. There's a pretty cool Mothra Easter egg when you see Ford's childhood terrarium, and the name on it is Moth, and it's been etched out, and there's an M-A written afterward, so it's named Mothra. And it would be kind of cool if that was just the name of his pet moth, was Mothra, and in the sequel they were like, hey look, there's this giant moth goddess that's flying around, probably not destroying things, but they're like, wow, look at that, what do we name it? And then Ford Brody steps in for a cameo and's like, hey, let's call it Mothra. That'd be kind of cool. That'd be pretty neat. Although I don't like that. I want the mythology of Mothra to already be intact by the time the next movie starts. Regardless, there's a Mothra Easter egg in this movie, and I actually convinced, I think it was my dad, to take me back and see this movie just so I could find it, because I didn't see it, and then when my friends told me about it at school, so I had him take me back to the theater just so I could watch for that one scene. It was pretty worth it. Joe makes it back to his original house right as helicopters pass over and he runs outside to check what's going on. He gets all his data before he leaves, though. The helicopters are headed to the original nuclear plant, which gets the Brodies' attention as they're trying to figure out what's going on. Right afterward, they're caught and pretty much put in jail. They're transported to the Gojira plant, where a massive cocoon is feeding on an old reactor. Serizawa comes down and checks on Joe, who gives what I would consider one of the most badass monologues in all of Godzilla history. Serizawa is pretty impressed by Joe's knowledge, and then suddenly the cocoon starts emitting this electromagnetic pulse. A grid comes over the cocoon to contain it, and Serizawa tries to kill it with electricity before the creature inside the cocoon can escape. The cocoon is shattered and a huge creature bursts out of it. Joe escapes only to be fatally injured by the creature as the creature pulls down on the containment grid, knocking over a giant crane that lands pretty much right on Joe. The creature also accidentally frees Ford from his imprisonment inside the back of a truck, and pretty soon Ford comes face to face with both his father and mother's killer. This movie has a real sense of scale, and it's first noticeable in this scene when the Muto crawls out of its pit. I have never seen scale like this in a monster movie before. Not one Godzilla movie, even the ones that I praised, like Godzilla 2000, come close to this sense of scale, where you're looking up at the monster from such a low angle, and you're just seeing the destruction on such a human level because you're seeing it from the human's perspective. It is absolutely fantastic, and it cements Gareth Edwards in film history for all times. The military takes over operations from Monarch. Serizawa requests the help of Ford and Joe. Joe dies in transport, and the creature is named Muto. Serizawa fills Ford in on the history of Gojira. In 1954, a nuclear sub reached the lowest depths for the first time in history, and it awakened something. We get our first hints to the Hollow Earth here as we hear that there's giant creatures in this world that were living in this era where the Earth was 10 times more radioactive, but as radiation subsided and went towards the core of the Earth, these monsters burrowed underground to, I guess, stay in touch with it so that they could feed off of it, which makes me question, does that mean Kong feeds off of radiation? Because there's that whole Hollow Earth is brought back up in Kong Skull Island, but does that mean that the skull crawlers are radioactive and Kong is radioactive? It totally doesn't seem like it, but that's what this movie would imply. Ford lets them know that the Muto was talking to something, which is probably the only helpful thing he does for Monarch this whole movie. Ford learns that nature has an order, a power to restore balance, and Godzilla is that power. Kind of like the idea we had in Godzilla Tokyo SOS with Mothra. The Muto attacks a Russian nuclear sub, eating its nuclear reactor, and basically just drops the sub in the middle of Hawaii. This actually wakes up Godzilla, who shows up to save Ford, not intentionally, but he saves Ford in the process, and he fights the Muto. Godzilla's landing causes a massive tsunami and is one of the most epic moments in film history. This scene is fantastic as we are teased that there's going to be this big Godzilla reveal. The waves are coming in, these soldiers shoot these flares up, you see them drop down and you just see the massive scale of his neck. You see him moving along, he's getting shot at, he walks away. You never actually get to fully see him, it's just glimpses of him. Once he shows up in the airport, he roars. It is incredible. The whole theater went freaking insane every single time I saw this movie. This scene is awesome. I love it so much. And then we abruptly cut away from the fight and we don't actually get to see it other than a little bit of teases on a news report of what happened. A second Muto hatches in Nevada and destroys Las Vegas. Ford hitches a ride with a military transport so that he can get back to his family, which I guess they just are like, yeah, we need all hands we can get, come with us. Serizawa suggests Godzilla is trying to help the humans, but the military plans to use a hydrogen bomb to kill all three monsters. Ford is put on a train transporting the nuclear weapons so that he can get to his family. There's a lot of real great nationwide damage as we see in the background of a lot of these shots, massive smoke plumes coming out from cities. And also we get to see a great scene of like a plane that went down on a highway and there's just so many cars destroyed. It just looks awesome. The female Muto attacks Ford's train, killing everyone but Ford, knocking Ford into the river where he's knocked out. This scene's pretty cool because, you know, you get a lot of these uncomfortable, very close-up shots with the female Muto, and it just overall has a really interesting and unique feel. San Francisco is under evacuation as Ford is recovered from the train's wreckage. Godzilla makes landfall, taking down a portion of the Golden Gate Bridge when an EMP hits San Francisco. Now, although I love this Golden Gate Bridge sequence, first of all, it's the only bit of Godzilla destroying stuff that we get in the entire movie, and I would have really appreciated a little more. Again, I really do like the way it plays out. However, I want Godzilla to destroy stuff. That's what I'm here to see. I'm not here to see Godzilla save the day, alright? I could go watch Godzilla vs. Gigan if I wanted that. I want to see Godzilla destroy stuff, and that's why I came to this movie, and that's why I was disappointed in the long run about this movie, is because that's what I thought this movie was promising us, was Godzilla destroying stuff. And also, the screen time for Godzilla does not bother me in the slightest when watching this movie. The other thing that's wrong with this Golden Gate Bridge scene is Godzilla would have to be like, 1,000 feet tall for it to be possible. He would not be able to stand up and walk through the Golden Gate Bridge. He's just not that tall, alright? He's not. He's a big monster, sure, but he's not like the 700 feet required to reach the top of the Golden Gate Bridge. When the EMP hits San Francisco, it's awesome because you know what that means. That means that the Muto has arrived. Planes start falling from the sky and the male Muto and the female Muto meet up. The male Muto snatches this warhead from a military boat, and then as he meets up with the female Muto, he gives it to her so that they can mate. I really like the scene of the Mutos meeting up because you have the male Muto fly onto this building and land on it, and he's looking around. He's pretty small. He's only like 150 feet. And then all of a sudden you just see these buildings just crumbling in the distance and the smoke just rising up, and out of the ashes comes the female Muto, and then they get to meet up, and she's 300 feet, so she's twice as big as him. And then they mate, and we don't actually see it on screen, luckily, but they do mate, and they have a hive of babies. A halo jump is conducted in one of the most fantastic scenes of Godzilla film history. And again, this movie, if you couldn't tell, has a lot of my favorite moments from Godzilla film history. The halo jump, Godzilla's first appearance in Hawaii, Joe Brody's monologue. There's so much to love about this movie. Although, this isn't my favorite Godzilla movie of all times for a lot of the reasons that I've listed throughout this review so far, and a little more that I'll get into right now, but generally this movie's pretty fantastic. We get one of the coolest lines in Godzilla history with Serizawa saying, "Let them fight." There's just a lot to love. So then we get Godzilla and Muto beating each other up. We don't actually see too much of it yet, but the battle begins, the halo jump is conducted, and Godzilla has a very quiet fight with the Muto. They don't want to wake anyone up. So there's a lot of sound effects missing in this final battle that really detract from the movie. First of all, when Ford's dropping from the halo jump, I can believe it that the adrenaline is pumping, but what I don't believe is that he doesn't hear Godzilla roaring 5 feet in front of him. I get that it's supposed to be artistic, and sure, it adds to that artsy level of the movie, or the scene anyways, but no way in the world is Godzilla going to be roaring and Ford not going to hear it. We read like posters or whatever leading up to the movie, the advertisement campaign saying like Godzilla's roar can be deafening when you're too close. Well, if it's deafening when you're too close, how can Ford not hear it when he's 3 feet away? That doesn't doesn't make any sense, but I don't know. There's missing footstep sound effects. Godzilla will be moving and it'll be silent. The Mutos will be moving and they're not making any noise. It's just kind of clunky, you know. I would have liked more sound effects. And a lot of the time, there's just like footsteps or whatever, and there's no destruction. And it's like, come on, give me some sound layering here. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, but you like the Shin Godzilla sound effects, you hypocrite. We're gonna get into that next week, and I'll discuss why I like those sound effects and why in this movie I'm bothered by the lack of sound effects. If you remember back to Godzilla vs. Mothra, the 90s version, you will remember that I tore into that movie and was like, there's missing roars, there's missing footsteps, this movie sucks. I don't know, I actually don't hate that movie, but you know, you get the point where I was like, there's a lot missing here. There's a lot of sound design that's just done. It's just bad. That's how I feel about this final fight. One thing that I find very interesting is the male Muto's protectiveness. Now, throughout the movie, it's never like played up that he's just trying to protect the female Muto at all costs, but that's exactly what he's doing, alright? There's scenes in this movie when he will literally get so paranoid that there's gonna be like another Godzilla coming, that he'll fly off and take perimeter around the area just so that he can still have the upper hand on Godzilla. There's a 2v1 fight at one point when he's giving it his all, flying up and just smashing into Godzilla trying to take him out, and then, you know, he sacrifices himself while trying to keep the female Muto alive. So there's a lot to like about the character of the kaiju in this movie that's not played up upon too much. The female Muto doesn't really seem to know what's going on. She just kind of gets the short end of the stick. If you really think about it, she doesn't do anything wrong. She shows up, walks around. That's literally all she does, is walk around, finds her mate, tries to mate, and then her babies are killed right in front of her, and she's killed as a result. Godzilla's kind of the bad guy if you think about it from that perspective of these two animals trying to have babies, and then all of a sudden this bigger animal just comes and picks on them and decapitates one of them and smashes another one into a building. Brings me back to a very interesting theory I heard by, I believe it was a YouTuber named Gorizard, and I know there is a YouTuber named Gorizard. Shout out to Gorizard, but I can't remember if Gorizard was the one who talked about this theory or not. Anyways, around 2014, there was a theory that I heard on YouTube from, I believe, once again, Gorizard, who stated that he didn't think that Godzilla was the power to restore balance in nature. He believed that the Mutos were. Humankind, mankind, has polluted and destroyed the earth so much that the Mutos show up to restore balance and kill off the humans, basically, and Godzilla shows up and is like, hey, wait a minute, I don't like this idea, and he kills them, basically out of revenge because they killed one of his species. As the body we found at the beginning of the movie, the skeleton, was a Godzilla species, or at least something very closely related to it. Which is a great way of viewing it, because once I heard that, it really opens up my perspective to the movie and makes me appreciate it even more. You do get the idea that Serizawa is very biased towards Godzilla throughout the movie. He doesn't want Godzilla to get hurt because his dad liked Godzilla, and you know that based off the terrible, don't read it, terrible Godzilla Awakening comic. Anyways, Godzilla intercepts the female Muto. The nuke is busted out of the hive so that the military can deactivate it. However, they're unable to, so they decide to take it offshore. There's, like I said, a 2-versus-1 fight where Godzilla is annihilated. 4 destroys the Muto's hive, distracting both Mutos. This is where you see one of the first times where the male Muto is just like, uh-oh, and he flies around doing his little perimeter watch to make sure everything's okay. Meanwhile, Godzilla gets the upper hand using his atomic breath for the very first time in order to save Ford. This scene will be remembered by me for all times because we were in the theater, me and my dad, and my brother was there too, and I turned to my dad and the first time I saw it, and I was like whispering to him one complaint. I whispered one complaint about this movie: there's no atomic breath. Literally, not even 5 minutes later, probably not even 2 minutes later, Godzilla uses the atomic breath in this scene, and the second the blue lights up on screen and everything goes silent and you just hear it building up his spines, I was so excited. My heart was pumping so fast. I was probably the most excited I've ever been in my entire life, and it was awesome. Godzilla fights the male Muto for a little bit as the female Muto goes and attacks the soldiers who are trying to get the nuke out to sea. Godzilla kills the male Muto by lining up his shot. This is my stepdad's favorite scene in the movie. I don't know why. I think the female Muto's death is way better. But he lines up the shot, he looks over his shoulder, he sees when the male Muto's coming, and then he times it so that he can smack his tail straight into the male Muto's face, smash it onto a building, and impale him. and that works. The male Muto dies, but the building that he dies on is weakened and collapses onto Godzilla. Godzilla's knocked out for a little bit. The female Muto finishes attacking the soldiers and killing them off. Ford shows up and is able to sneak out to sea on a boat, but the female Muto catches up to the tugboat and is about to kill him when he has the nuke on board. Suddenly, Godzilla shows up from behind her, does the best Godzilla kill in all of history, which is his kiss of death, which was awesome. So he breathes his atomic breath down the female Muto's neck. It decapitates her by disintegrating the skin in her neck. And if you can't tell what that Muto is behind me, it's the decapitated female Muto. I didn't really know how to draw it. When I drew it without the head, it looked silly. So I just drew the head in there being blown off next to it. And there's the atomic breath smoke pouring out of her, falling over her head with the blood spurting everywhere. Because, again, this movie's actually pretty bloody. I've said this in previous videos, but this movie does have a lot of bloodshed in it that's just not focused on. It's a very dark movie, which is one of my biggest complaints. You really have to watch the Blu-ray even to know what's going on, and you have to have your TV's contrast pretty high because this movie's so dark. The theater wasn't like that, but the Blu-ray and the DVD are. There was second wave DVD Blu-rays that fixed this problem, but why do I have to go back and pay for another version of this movie when the first time that I bought it, the first 2 times that I bought it should have sufficed? That's just kind of unexcusable that they would do that when they did the DVD release of this movie. Anyways, the movie is very dark, so you don't get to see it too much, but there is quite a bit of bloodshed in this final battle. Godzilla bleeds multiple times. Anytime he's hit in the gills, he'll bleed, which is his biggest weakness in the movie, and the male Muto hones in on that pretty quickly. The city is saved. The next morning, Godzilla wakes up from the rubble. Elle and Sam and Ford are all reunited. It's a great happy ending. Godzilla returns to sea, and the movie ends. So, the human storyline in this movie is great. There's very interesting characters. I really do miss the inclusion of Cranston after the first act. Ford isn't too interesting, but I still like Serizawa quite a bit. The kaiju stuff in this movie is good. There's not enough of a presence for the kaiju. I mean, the whole movie's basically about the Mutos, but you don't really get a feel for Godzilla's presence in this movie, which is a big problem for it because this movie's called Godzilla, and although I don't have a problem with the screen time for Godzilla, I have a problem with his lack of effect on the story. He basically is just a big gun to show up and save the day instead of being the main prevalent thing in this movie like he should have been. Special effects are fantastic. There's amazing scale in this movie. There's very interesting directing, and the music's good. It's not a Fikube, but it's alright. It's serviceable. I like some of the themes quite a bit. I really enjoy I think it's called like Following Godzilla or something like that. That theme. I like the intro theme. I like the 2v1 songs pretty good, and Godzilla's victory starts out pretty good. But a lot of the music in this movie is just kind of forgettable in my opinion. I don't think it's great. It's very distinct, I will give it that. I just don't think it's as good as Ifukube. Godzilla's design in this movie, it's okay. And I know I don't talk about Godzilla's design a lot, but seeing as though it's the design we're stuck with for now, or at least we think we're stuck with, it's okay. It could have been better. Godzilla is fat. Watch the movie. He's fat, alright? I don't care how much muscle is put on him. He physically looks fat, alright? Even if it is all muscle, he still looks fat. His dorsal fins are too small, his eyes are too small, and I don't like the elephant feet. However, again, that's not gonna I mean, I've said this in videos before, that's not gonna take away from my enjoyment of the movie too much. It's just going to be a little thing. It's just going to be a little thing that I ding it on because it's alright. The characterization of Godzilla also needs to be worked on because he doesn't get too much of a characterization outside of he just doesn't like the Mutos. Overall, I'd give this movie a 9 out of 10. It's awesome. I love watching this movie. I have taken a break from watching it because when it came out in 2014, I watched it so much over and over and over and over and over again that I just had to cool down. I haven't watched this movie in probably around a year, so it's good to go back to it and check it out again. It's a great movie. That does it for my review of Godzilla 2014, guys. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you guys next week for Shin Godzilla, a movie that somehow I managed to like more than this movie despite me loving this movie. Thank you guys all for watching. D-Man out. What's up everybody, D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing my review for Shin Gojira. So, this is Godzilla-Thon episode 34. I don't know how many times I have to review this movie on the channel. I don't actually have to review it any times. I love this movie. So I review it over and over and over again. I mean, I've done the English dub review. I've done the Japanese review. I've done an in-depth one. This one's got to be my fourth, at least. So, getting into it, I mean, you know, I don't really need to get into the background of my experience with this movie, right? If you really want to know about the background of what I thought about when leading up to this movie, you really can just go back and watch my videos. I mean, I made videos leading up to the release of this movie, which this is the first Godzilla-Thon that we're covering of a movie that I covered on the channel, which is fun. It's really cool. If you really want to know, like, what was D-Man thinking at this stage in Godzilla's, you know, the advertisement campaign or like leading up to the movie, you can go back and find videos and you will hear exactly what I was thinking. I don't have to recap it. In fact, I probably shouldn't because I might wind up contradicting myself due to me not remembering very well. Anyways, getting into my review for Shin Godzilla, this will not be any different from any other Godzilla-Thon. I'm going to do the same general plot rundown. Everything's going to be generally the same as usual. So the movie starts out with a boat called the Glory Maroon being discovered off the coast of Hanada. A geyser erupts, destroying the boat and the aqua line that runs underneath the ocean. Yusaki and Rando meet in the Prime Minister's office to speak about the incident. Residents in the Tokyo Aqualine area are all joking around about this situation, not taking it very seriously until something starts stomping on the ground floor above them. This was my first indication that I was in for a treat, because the movie starts out, it does not skip a beat. You get straight into it. Godzilla has his presence shown from the very first scene of this movie. You feel the presence of Godzilla. Now, although he won't wind up looking like Godzilla until much later into the movie, you still get the sense that he's there. You still get the feel, and once you start hearing the footsteps going on the seafloor, oh man, that was awesome, because it's the 54 footsteps, the sound effects are all classic, I love it so much. Rando sees footage of a giant creature walking around on the ground on YouTube. Or whatever he's looking on, I don't know. The government goes into a panic and they can't figure out what it is. They're all discussing about, oh, is it a thermal vent or a volcano or is it a nuclear sub? What is it? But Rando discusses the potential that the heat being released by the water is being caused by a massive creature. He's, of course, not taken seriously. Yuki from Space Godzilla, which... great, Shin Godzilla using old classic actors. I don't know why they didn't get the actor who played Ogata back. That's crazy to me. This is the second Godzilla movie in a row that Akira Takarada expressed interest in, and they didn't bring him back for even a cameo. Anyways, getting back to what I was saying, Yuki from Space Godzilla is all focused on the response, but the Prime Minister is more focused about meetings and the politics of the situation instead of dealing with it. Hideki stops Rando and warns him to stop being a rebel and stop bringing up stupid things such as a giant creature causing the eruption. Suddenly, a tail rises up out of the ocean, sending the government into a panic. Rando now takes action, only wanting a response, but everyone around him doesn't seem to understand what to do. Most people are just worried about the cost, and there's biologists worried about the new species. The creature starts moving up the Tanu River, and the creature works its way through the shallows. Yusaki Shimura calls his friend Hiromi in. Hiromi thinks the creature can in fact come on land, as the footage online suggests that it can stand on two legs and support its own weight. The creature makes its way to the Kamata ward of Tokyo, busting through multiple bridges along his way. During the Prime Minister's press conference, in which the Prime Minister prematurely calls the creature's soon-to-be death, as he says that it will beach itself in the shallows and be killed by its own weight, the creature makes landfall in the Kamata ward. There's a fantastic scene, you guys know how much I love this sequence, that starts with frantic edits, showing the fear of everyone around as the monster attacks. The music ramps up and plays one of my all-time favorite songs, Persecution of the Masses. As the monster gets to the Shinagawa district, the Prime Minister is paused, not knowing what to do in response. Eventually, the JSDF is mobilized and sent out against the monster. The creature halts in Shinagawa and evolves into a 150-foot tall red creature. I think he's just a little bit over 150 feet tall, but you get the point, around that area. The JSDF helicopters are called off because civilians are in the area. The civilians are more than likely killed when the creature turns around, makes a 180, and starts bolting back towards the ocean. This all happens only after its dorsal fins start to burn red, though. Now, when I actually saw the movie, I didn't quite know what was happening right here. I honestly thought that the second form, or technically third form of Godzilla, was about to do some lame extreme version of the atomic breath. Like, maybe he was gonna shoot out the blue classic, like, mist atomic breath, and then later on in the movie he'd show up with the purple version. I didn't really know how that was going to play out, but I like the way that it happens because it introduces a very new and fascinating thing, that being Godzilla's dorsal fins aren't just there for no reason. They're actually thermal vents to help release heat in his body. This also opens up Godzilla's back for a weak point so that they can exploit it later in the movie, as Godzilla's back needs to be ripped open and exposed so that you can penetrate the skin, that way the heat can release easier. His skin is in fact so thick that it traps the heat inside, and he'll die if he doesn't have a way to release the heat. So his body slits open in multiple different areas so that the heat can escape. Shin Godzilla's got one of the most crazy biologies of all Godzillas, with starting out with very large gills that will seep blood on land, and then he evolves into a creature that can survive on land, but it turns out that he's so overheated that he needs to get to the ocean where his back can split open and he can breathe and live, and then eventually he just turns into this massive creature. So it's a very cool, very crazy evolution. The Minister's Council head out and check the damage firsthand. Yaguchi calls his friend Izama to make a task force to combat the creature. It's a band of rebels, including some leading biologists and chemists. The discovery is made by Pink Towel Guy. I don't honestly know his name, and I don't think they actually ever state his name in the movie. You would have just had to have read his title card on screen, but I missed it. I was too busy reading the subtitles. Anyways, Pink Towel Guy discovers that the creature will continue to evolve. Hiromi discovers that the creature runs on nuclear fission. An American-Japanese ambassador is called into Japan. Her name is Kyoko Ann Patterson. She requests the help of a man called Goro Maki. Yes, that is the exact same name from Son of Godzilla. I still don't know if that was an intentional Easter egg or not. I have to think it was. I think there was also someone with the name Goro Maki in Godzilla 1984 too, something like that. He's a man who apparently predicted the appearance of this monster. Maki is missing. He turns out to be the owner of the Glory Maroon from the start of the movie. Maki named the creature Godzilla. He also gave it a Japanese name, Gojira, according to the Japanese legends of Odo Island, where apparently he was born, which is a fantastic and very sneaky callback to the original 54 movie. They never directly call it out and are like, oh, look, Odo Island in 1954, a monster was there. They never do that. They just say, back 60 years ago, which places it in 1954, Goro Maki on Odo Island was either born, or we never get an age estimate for how old he is, but I'm gonna assume he was in his teens or whatever. So he witnessed some stuff that really messed him up, and what he witnessed was the Japanese, we're supposed to believe it's the Japanese and Americans just dumping nuclear waste into the ocean. Maki's last words are written down on a piece of paper, saying, "I did as I pleased, you do the same." This is the big theme of the movie, as Anno, the director, really wants to push that message that people need to do what they please. They need to start working together and getting things done that will benefit everyone, and do what they please. Do as in work together. I'll actually go more in depth with all of the themes and allegory of this movie next week during, not Godzilla-Thon, because this will be the last week of Godzilla-Thon for a while, but during a video essay that I've been working on for a while. So the origins of Godzilla, as they're briefly explained, are in 1954, an underwater ancient marine creature, we still don't know totally what that means, fed off of nuclear waste. Maki finds out and is kicked out of his scientific field. We don't know exactly why he was kicked out of his field, presumably just so that the government could bury this whole incident. But regardless, he's kicked out of his field, much like Dr. Mifune from Terror of Mechagodzilla. Turns out Godzilla's body harbors elements unknown to science, which explains why he's able to stand on land without dying, and how he's able to self-evolve. Godzilla's body evolves to fit the environment it's in. If it's in a hostile environment, aka if the military is trying to kill him, he will evolve so that he cannot be killed by the military, so that he can survive in his environment. If you hit him with a nuclear bomb, he will evolve so that he can survive in an environment where he's hit by a nuclear bomb. That's just the way it's explained. We know that there's rapid evolutions that he can undergo in order to not die on the spot. So, presumably, this Godzilla is immortal. The plan is made to stop Godzilla's blood in place so that he can't evolve, which will render him immobile, because his blood will start to heat up to the point when he has to rapidly cool himself down, forcing him to evolve into a frozen state. That's actually what goes on at the end of the movie. If you pay attention, they don't just freeze Godzilla's skin. That's not at all what they do. They only halt his blood in place. What Godzilla then does is start to overheat, making him rapidly freeze. You start to see him glow at the end of the movie, and he then evolves into this frozen, like almost stone state. That way he won't die. And notice how his next evolutions, the things coming off of his tail, they don't really seem like they can have blood. They seem like just skin and bones. That's probably to reduce the ability to have the coagulant used on them. Godzilla relands in his fourth form in my favorite sequence of the entire movie, and honestly, probably my favorite sequence of Godzilla history. That sequence is Godzilla's landing in, I don't remember where he lands in honestly, but wherever Godzilla lands, Godzilla's landing on the beach all the way to his destruction of Tokyo with the atomic breath. Probably my favorite portion of Godzilla history right there. What makes this scene so great is the fast-paced nature of it. We get the sense that Godzilla's been on land for a long time. They even call out how slowly he's moving. However, things that really make this seem exciting is the action-packed editing. Everything goes by so fast. Godzilla makes his way through Tokyo very, very quickly, and that is aided by the wonderful music of Akira Ifukube. We have some of my favorite Godzilla themes of all times making their way back into this movie. King Kong vs. Godzilla's Godzilla theme. We have Godzilla's theme from Terror of Mechagodzilla, of course one of my favorite themes of all time. And then we also have some very exciting new music that's introduced in this scene as well. It is stated that Godzilla's head and feet must be attacked in order to reduce radiation leaks. Turns out that Godzilla's body harbors so much radiation that they worry shooting him in the stomach will release all that radiation into the public and into the world. So what they do is they fire upon his head and his feet, presumably so that they can knock him down and use the Yaguchi coagulant on him. If you remember, leading up to the release of this movie, anytime I did a trailer breakdown or talked about the trailers of this movie or talked about any of the footage of this movie, I was always bringing up how they were shooting Godzilla's head and feet, and I never had a reason why. I thought maybe, you know, they're just trying to kill him faster. The fastest way to kill an animal is by shooting it in the brain, right? And a lot of us bounced that theory around, and a lot of people noticed that too, is how they were shooting at Godzilla's head and his feet, and we never had a good answer until after we saw the movie. That's one of the best things about leading up to this movie, was how much speculation I was able to do. It was a lot of fun, and once I finally got those answers, it was equally as fun to know, oh, that's the reason why. The army mobilizes into a sister city of Tokyo to stop Godzilla. Godzilla is unfazed by everything the JSDF does to him. First off, they shoot some giant turrets at him, and these massive bullets just ping off his skin and fly in all different directions. It is so cool and very well done. We've never seen that level of combatants from the military against Godzilla. We've never actually gotten to see what bullets would do to Godzilla. Usually you'd think they just like hit him and crunch or something, but here you see his skin is so hard that it literally deflects the bullets. The JSDF start to unload missiles on him, and it just explodes everywhere. These missiles are going off right on his head, and every time the smoke envelops his skull, suddenly his face will just appear coming out of the smoke. It's absolutely awesome. It turns out that helicopters just don't have an effect on God. Type 10 tanks, which are pretty old school actually, are used against Godzilla, as well as long-range missiles bombard his skull. All of this does absolutely nothing, except for provide one of the most visually interesting scenes of Godzilla history, because the directing here from Anno and the cinematography from Shinji Yaguchi is so great. This scene is absolutely amazing and very underrated. A lot of people will give the atomic breath sequence so much praise. However, scenes that I think equally match it would be the moving shot from the car earlier in the movie, where you're in a car's perspective looking at Godzilla as he's walking through this building, and you eventually catch up to him, and he's moving one way, you're moving the other, and you eventually meet up right as he steps on a building, and you're just looking up at how massive he is. And this sequence right here, I think this sequence has so much interesting and creative directing that we've never seen before, that it gets so little praise for what it's worth. It is incredible, and everyone, you know, the atomic breath scene is amazing, yes, I'm not going to deny that, but this scene is awesome as well. I think a lot of people need to remember how great this scene is. Godzilla's destruction in the city could have been more. Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see him actually go after things and destroy things instead of just walking a line. That being said, they make it work. They make it work so well that you actually forget how little you see Godzilla destroy stuff in this movie. I love the way the camera is attached to the tank barrels as they're firing at Godzilla, or the way that you're seeing soldiers' perspective as they shoot Godzilla. It reminds me a lot of both Gareth Edwards and Ishiro Honda all in one. Soon some jets drop heavy artillery on Godzilla, and this actually seems to affect him. He starts to turn away and head towards the ocean until they blast him even more with bombs, until he's basically bombed into oblivion. Smoke covers the entire screen and we don't know what's happened to Godzilla. Suddenly, out of the smoke flies a bridge, which apparently Godzilla kicked off of its stand and into the air, and it lands on some army tanks. Godzilla emerges unfazed. Tokyo is evacuated, however they don't fully evacuate Tokyo. There's a lot of people who wind up dead. Japan goes into defense against Godzilla, and one of my favorite songs from the movie, Defeat Is No Option, kicks in. US bombers fly into Tokyo, and Godzilla develops an EMP to shut off all the lights in Japan. It makes for one of my favorite shots of the entire franchise history. This movie actually contains my favorite shot of franchise history, but this is one of my favorite shots of Godzilla stepping and all the lights going out around him, and every time it just cuts back and you just see every time you hear the all the lights in a certain district will go out and until it's completely pitch black and you just see Godzilla's flame. And the red burning in Godzilla's skin is one of my favorite things about this design. It reminds me a lot of the burning Godzilla design from the 90s. It's very cool. The Japanese cabinet is evacuated. Important members leave by helicopter. Other members, such as Yaguchi, leave by car. Rando sees Godzilla in the city, which is very cool as well. And it's soon afterwards that the US hit Godzilla with some MOB-2s. I don't know. That's just what the planes or the bombs are called or something. Now, these bombs do some damage. They really make Godzilla bleed. These things hit him directly in the back, right where his body needs to be open so that his blood can flow, and they penetrate straight through that thin layer of skin and explode in his back, creating a geyser of blood. In response, Godzilla gets really agitated and starts to glow bright purple. One of my favorite things about this scene is seeing other people's perspectives, such as the main prime minister's perspective as well as Rando's perspective, as you can see the glows start to emit from around buildings. Godzilla's mouth splits open in two ways. First, he detaches his bottom jaw, and second, his bottom jaw splits in half, which I don't know the biology logistics of that, but it's at least very interesting to look at. It's very cool to look at. Then all of a sudden, Godzilla releases this black mist throughout the city. Now, this scene was spoiled for me before I got to see the movie in theaters, so I didn't really get to experience it, but the second this happened, my entire theater erupted into applause, and I did too. It is so rewarding to see. So, the black mist starts going through the city before Godzilla suddenly ignites it. His eye seals over with some sort of, I don't know, protective lens, and Godzilla sets Tokyo into a sea of fire. He shifts the fire into a thin purple beam of atomic energy. Godzilla kills the plane that bombed him before capping off the radiation, which seems to hurt him. The second he closes his mouth and stops releasing the atomic energy, he roars. And the only time he roars in this movie is when he's hurt. All the radiation builds up in Godzilla's body and he undergoes a rapid evolution. Suddenly, he develops the ability to emit the radiation from his dorsal fin, which destroys 2 more planes flying above him by shooting just multiple beams straight through the air. I did not expect this. I expected Godzilla to only use his laser light show during the daytime, but seeing it at night with all the darkness surrounding him and the purple cutting through the night sky is a real spectacle to behold. I feel bad for anyone who didn't get to see this movie in theaters because it was absolutely fantastic. Then Godzilla uses his front beam, his solo mouth beam, to destroy the rest of Japan. He kills the Prime Minister and his cabinet and burns the entire city down. This is the best shot of the movie. Godzilla walking in front of a wall of fire as his atomic energy depletes and he soon shuts down. The next morning, the task force reassembles to stop Godzilla. It's pretty much left to Rando Yaguchi, Hideki Akasaka, and some other misfits. Yaguchi breaks all the rules in order to stop Godzilla by sending the biological information across Japan so that everyone can study it. A US-Japan task force is made to combat Godzilla. It turns out Godzilla has some sort of phased array radar, whatever that means, EMP, that stops all electronics from being used around him. He emits this thing at will, meaning Godzilla, although shut down, is still conscious. One of Godzilla's dorsal fins was shot off during the bombing by the US earlier in the movie. It's revealed that it's starting to grow a new Godzilla. This is a much more in-depth scene in the deleted scene that shows chunks of Godzilla's skin turning into faces. The US wants to drop a thermonuclear warhead on Godzilla. Iguchi is pissed at Hideki, who states that the warhead is the only way to stop Godzilla, and this is the only way to gain international support. He says it's a scrap and build reality. Iguchi decides it is now that the freezing plan must be ramped into full effect. They have a coagulant formula, the only thing they need is to produce it. Iguchi calls every company in Japan into production of this drug against Godzilla. The Prime Minister okays the Iguchi plan, however he also signed off on the warhead. Godzilla will reach full force in 15 days and be active again. The US will also drop a nuclear warhead on the 15th day. The US states if Godzilla surfaces in New York, they will do the same thing and drop a nuke on him there. Turns out Maki knew how to stop Godzilla, but allowed Godzilla to attack Japan because the Japanese didn't protect his wife, who was killed due to radiation poisoning or something. We never totally find out. It's right after this talk of what happened to Maki after his death that we cut to a quick scene of Godzilla's tail splitting open. This scene is super controversial and I've covered it in depth before. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. The pink towel guy learned that the map of Godzilla's DNA that Goro Maki left behind at his death actually must be folded like origami before you can fully understand it. As it is discovered, Godzilla can live to evolve anywhere. The Germans help solve Maki's riddle, and it turns out that the Iguchi plan will work against Godzilla. Hideki and Izumi convince the Prime Minister to proceed with the Yashiori operation. The JSDF love the plan. Iguchi reaches out to the French to interrupt the nuclear countdown to buy Japan more time. The US helps with the Iguchi plan. Izumi pushes for Rando to become the Prime Minister after Godzilla. Iguchi inspires his troops for the Yashiori operation, stating that there will be a high risk of acute radiation exposure, which is something this movie does very well, as makes you really feel the fear that Godzilla is radioactive. It doesn't do it as much as I'd like, it doesn't do it to the level of the 54 movie, but it still does it very well. The Yashiori operation begins when some bullet trains bomb Godzilla, waking him up. He starts to release the atomic back blast beams, ooh that's a mouthful, and drones bomb him from long range. The point is to run him out of atomic energy in his dorsal fin projectiles. This works, and he has to start firing the beam from his mouth. Suddenly, he's hit by so many bombs that he can't take it, and this bolt of a light runs up his tail, turning the tip of his tail purple and emitting a beam from his tail. The drones continue to bomb him and all the surrounding buildings around him. They knock all the buildings over onto him so that he can't get up. He does, however, break through the buildings and starts to get up when some long-range missiles fire more rockets, blowing up buildings around him. The buildings around him land on him, knocking him over. When Godzilla is down, the coagulant is injected into his mouth. Godzilla atomic breaths the crew into oblivion. He is slowed down by the coagulant, but can still stand up and starts to run away. Trains explode, knocking him back over, and the coagulant is pumped into his mouth even more. He gets up before the coagulant takes full effect, forcing him to freeze. Turns out that Godzilla will be frozen for at least 2 or 3 years. Iguchi and Hideki will run for office for the next election, or something, I couldn't totally tell. It sounds like Rando wants to be Prime Minister now because he respects what happened and he wants to make it so that if Godzilla wakes back up, nothing like that can ever happen again. He will be on top of the game, but it also, the whole movie sets up Higuchi to run for office, so I don't know if the idea is that they're going to run against each other or run with each other. Point is, they're both going for higher positions in the government. Kyoko backs Rando, stating that she'll be president of the US and he'll lead Japan and they can lead together. Iguchi owns his decisions against Godzilla no matter how many casualties they caused, and Iguchi states that things are far from over. That is the last line of the movie, hopefully implying that there will be a sequel. Godzilla's tail starts to evolve and the movie ends. All these humanoids are coming off of it and the tip of it splits open into a face. That's what happens at the end. The human story in this movie is very good. I love Rando Iguchi. He's one of my favorite Godzilla protagonists. And the thing that I really love about the human story in this movie is that it's driven by the kaiju story. Everything that happens in this movie is a result of Godzilla's actions. Everything is a reaction to Godzilla, which makes this movie, even though Godzilla's not in it a lot, feel very Godzilla-centric. As some of you guys I'm sure remember from my War of the Gargantuas review a year ago, I really love when the movies focus on the kaiju first and foremost. The kaiju don't always have to be there a lot, but just as long as their presence is felt, that is what I want. The kaiju story in this movie is great for that reason as well. The human and the kaiju story play off each other perfectly. And the kaiju stuff actually on screen is very creative. It's original, fun, and menacing all at the same time. I mean, Godzilla's first form doesn't, alright, let me be specific because people will always get confused. Godzilla's first form is not on screen. Godzilla's second form, the Kamachikun form, it's laughable. I like the third form, I like the Shinagawa-kun, and I love his final stage. The effects in this movie are fantastic. There's only few scenes in this movie when the special effects will look a little fake, and even then, they still look better than Justice League 2017. Yeah, that was a random dig at Justice League. I just saw that movie, and oh, the special effects were awful. The music in this movie is amazing. My top 2 favorite soundtracks of all time. I really struggle. I always go back and forth between the original movie and this one as the number 2, but I think this one does hold a place as number 2 for me. The number 1 soundtrack is MonsterVerse Godzilla. Awesome music in that movie. And overall, I give Shin Godzilla a solid 9 out of 10. If you wanted me to go more in depth with some topic on the movie, I'm sure I do in another video. I'll just leave it at that. You can go back and listen to my solo review from when I very first saw the movie, or my solo review from when I reviewed the English cut from a couple months ago. You can also go back and listen to my in-depth review that I did with Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir, back when the movie came out. That does it for this one, guys. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you guys next time. D-Man, out. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing the 35th episode of Godzilla-Thon. That's right, Godzilla-Thon is back from the dead, back out of retirement. Actually, this series will never end, because anytime they make a new Godzilla movie, I'll be here to review it. So today, we are gonna do my spoiler review. You guys have all been asking for it. I've been excited to do it. My spoiler review for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. Or, I'd like to call it Godzilla Monster Planet, because that's the actual translation. That's just a cooler title. That's just my opinion, but it's right, Alright, so getting into this, actually this is 4 pages worth of notes. The only other review to have 4 pages worth of notes was Shin Godzilla, so I don't know how long this one's gonna be. I'm very excited to start recording Kong-a-thon. I'm actually waiting for a specific piece of equipment before I start recording that, but I'm gonna be getting that equipment soon, and then I'm gonna be recording Kong-a-thon, and I'm very excited for Kong-a-thon, as I know a lot of you guys are. This just feels like a great return to form for me, so I know this has nothing to do with Godzilla Monster Planet, but I don't know, I just feel like it's a really cool thing to finally go back to Godzilla-Thon. It's been over a month. I think it's been like 2 months since the last Godzilla-Thon. I don't know, I've missed it. I've missed doing the reviews. I've been watching Kongs, I've been taking notes, I've been doing the pictures. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you've seen that I've been posting and teasing some of the art. Same thing with on Facebook. There you go. This one for Godzilla Monster Planet. Let's get right into it. Haruo Sakaki. He's the main character of this movie. He's taken over an escape shuttle on this massive transport ship that has left Earth and is headed to distant planets. He plans to blow himself up in the pod, and the pod will blow up with him, assuming that the mission, which is what the crew is going with, doesn't change. So what the mission is they're planning to leave the elderly on a new planet, and Haruo's saying if that plan isn't aborted, he's gonna blow himself up. They're at the planet called Taui. They're there for immigration. Haruo is pissed because the elderly are being dropped off on the planet, and it's not suited for human life. The elderly contact Haruo and warn him that they did want to go on the planet. They volunteered for this. They want to die on land. They know the risk. He's all upset, and so he's just upset, so he gives up. They don't want to die in space. They've been there for 20 years, searching for a new planet, and then they're just done. Haruo surrenders, and he's arrested. The elderly die in the atmosphere on their way to the planet. Their ship blows up, and Haruo's watching from his jail cell. Haruo's grandfather dies on the shuttle as well, so it's pretty emotional for him. He really didn't want to see that happen, but his worst dream came true. Haruo recaps Earth's history in a quick montage. Kaiju appeared, killing everyone, until one day, Godzilla showed up. Godzilla killed everything in his path, whether that be kaiju or humanity, and not even thousands of nukes being released at once could stop him. The movie directly references when multiple hundreds of nukes hit Godzilla at once, but in a timeline explained video that we're going to be doing pretty soon, we'll talk about the extended history of the Monster Planet timeline and how they did launch thousands of nukes at Godzilla and he just kind of walked it off. That raises a big plot hole, and that plot hole I'll maybe discuss in a future video. Just to pose the question to you guys now, can someone explain to me how it's possible for Godzilla to tank 1,000, I think they say actually it's like 20,000 nukes, it's something absolutely ridiculous number, 20,000 nukes, and yet he's killed by a couple of robots and some EMPs being deployed inside of his body? I get it, he has that dorsal fin on his back that shoots out this shield that can protect him, he has the whole regeneration thing, and the EMPs in his body disrupt his regeneration, but really, if this Godzilla is powerful enough to regenerate from being hit by 20,000 nukes, if his dorsal fin can regenerate and protect him from the shield, with the shield, and you know, he's just gonna live from that, this Godzilla is by far the strongest Godzilla of all times ever. I don't care that they managed to, spoiler alert, kill him in the movie. I don't care. He's definitely the strongest Godzilla ever. No Godzilla we've ever seen can do that. I don't even think Final Wars, who took a meteor to the face, could do that. So that's insane. They killed this Godzilla, which is absolutely incredible. Good job, humanity. Haruo, your plan shouldn't have worked. The aliens show up. I say the aliens like I've already established that they're aliens. Alright, so aliens show up on the planet. They show up to help humanity, but they fail. The aliens help evacuate Earth. There's also multiple species of aliens. We'll get into that in another video. During evacuation, Godzilla blows up a shuttle, killing Haruo's parents when the shuttle falls down onto these cars and they explode and everyone's dead. Space travel is cold and lonely and dangerous. Lots of humanity die on the travel. Some of them kill themselves, which is a pretty brutal scene when you see a guy shoot himself right in the face and his blood goes all over the wall. That's the only blood we actually see in the movie, which is interesting. Haruo says humanity has no pride or care anymore, and that's one thing that Godzilla took from them. Haruo studies Godzilla in prison and has help from an Exif, that's the alien race, named Mephthes, or as Haruo says, Mephthes. There is about a 0.1% chance of finding a new habitable planet outside of Earth. At least that's in range of this space station. Morale is low, and so the decision is made that Earth is 11.9 light years away, but it's worth a shot trying to get back there. A paper is published suggesting that Godzilla can be killed. The plan to head back to Earth is becoming a popular theory and is becoming a reality. The Gamatron, which I guess is some sort of prediction machine, starts using 80% of its power to run simulations on if a jump to Earth will work. People get excited to head back to Earth. A whole bunch of the humans on the ship have never seen Earth before, and the humans talk of the Gamatron as if it's the Exif's god, which is interesting. I really don't know. Do they worship this machine? I'm not sure. Either way, a plan to use a subspace warp jump to Earth is made. The aliens talk to each other about heading to Earth, and it's about this time that the Gamatron creates some sort of long wormhole that the Earth nations, which is what the spaceship, like the international species community on the spaceship is called, enters the wormhole. They're basically spit out at Earth. Reconnaissance drones probe the Earth. Particles covering the atmosphere interfere with the visibility, however. One drone is shot down by an output of particles, aka the atomic breath. The Earth Union identifies Godzilla is on the surface of the planet. They then debate how to proceed. It turns out that Godzilla hasn't actually had a huge effect on the oxygen of Earth. Even though he's radioactive and leaves radiation everywhere he goes, people can still breathe safely on the planet, according to these drones. And then later on they'll say that they can't, so I don't really know which one to believe. Mephthes releases Haruo from prison. Actually, wait a minute, I'm gonna go back. I totally know which one to believe. It's definitely these drones in the air. These drones are telling the truth because later on, if you remember, we see in the post-credit scenes, Haruo is breathing without his mask on and he's just fine. So there you go. So Haruo is released from prison. Mephthes gets him out. Haruo brings the plan to kill Godzilla up to the Earth nations and says that it will work if more data is collected on Godzilla's combat. They need to find some sort of super organ of Godzilla's. 600 people are sent to the surface of the Earth in order to do this. Thermobaric bombs are dropped on the surface to wake up Kong, to clear out a forest for landing, and Haruo has the old Terasawa Pass trapped, meaning he places traps all over the Terasawa Pass, so that if Godzilla walks through it, he'll be bombed by these whatever the traps are. I don't think we actually find out what the traps do until the very end, and even then, that's clearly a different plan that they're putting in motion. It's definitely not the same one from the start, because he says, oh, we need to put traps in this place. So, I don't know what the original traps do. Communication to the orbiting spaceship is blocked by some sort of fog bank. You know, because Skull Island has the fog bank, so this movie had a fog bank. I really feel like these guys just watched King Kong and were like, yeah, that's pretty badass, and so they just did it in a Godzilla movie, which totally true. Kong Skull Island's a badass movie, but there is a lot of parallels to Kong Skull Island in this movie. And I'm not just talking like King Kong in general, I'm specifically talking Kong Skull Island. And you guys can see I made a whole video like parodying that fact, the Kong Skull Island trailer, or Godzilla Monster Planet Kong Skull Island style. Anyways, Haruo is planning to investigate the terrain, although he can't be let off because he committed the crimes at the beginning of the movie, so they kind of have him in handcuffs. I can't speak, apparently. They have him in handcuffs, and his fangirl Yuko is put in charge of him. She actually doesn't fangirl out about him too much, however. She's clearly obsessed with him. She calls him senpai, all this weird stuff, even though they never met, so she clearly has a deep respect for this guy. And I like how in the subtitles on Netflix, which absolutely suck, by the way, I actually have only seen the English cut of this movie once, but I've seen the Japanese cut a number of times. The subtitles are terrible. Sometimes they don't show up at all. Sometimes they show up really late and then are off screen way too quickly before you get to read them. And in cases like this, they're blatantly translating wrong. She clearly says senpai, and I know they don't really have a word for that in English, although I guess you could be like mister. You could have her say mister, but it's funny because they just always change it to Haruo, so she's always calling his name. It's like, that's not what she's saying. I can understand his name. That's not, even though it's in Japanese, that's not something that we change for English. Anyways, some of the plants have become super strong to the point where you can shoot them with these what is that? Like some sort of torch, some sort of welding torch, and they won't even break. It's mentioned that it could be deadly to expose yourself to the fog in the air. That's not actually what they say. They just said, hey, be careful. If you poke a hole in your spacesuit, you're gonna die. But it's like, I don't understand why you would, because clearly earlier the reconnaissance drone said, no, yeah, you can breathe on this planet without your helmets. And then later on, we definitely see humans doing that, so I don't know why they're so worried about it. I guess they just don't want to take that risk. However, I just assumed it was due to the fog in the air. Yuko asks if the elderly were killed by the bombs that Haruo placed on the shuttle, which is a super dark thing to think about. The bombs that Haruo rigs up on the shuttle to blow himself up with at the start of the movie, if then this command decided to blow up the elderly upon entry into orbit with those same bombs, that's really messed up. I don't understand why they would. Haruo doesn't either. He says he has to stay optimistic and he'd rather not think about it. But I don't understand, like, why? What would they get out of that? What would they get out of killing the elderly? Just to be like, we got rid of these people who are wasting our supplies. I don't understand it. They're gonna die on the planet anyways. Haruo makes it very clear that the planet's not habitable for human life. So it's just interesting, just something to think about. Maybe they did blow up on entry because of the command. However, as Haruo says, he'd rather not think about that. So let's move on. Haruo says humanity lost not just the Earth to Godzilla, but they also lost justice and dignity, which is something I really like that. Justice and dignity. I like the way they play around with that, having Haruo really feel like he's trying to help regain humanity's dignity as well as his own dignity by fighting and killing Godzilla. Haruo notices Earth, quote-unquote, remembered humanity. This is found when fossilized remains of a city are discovered. So the whole city has basically been fossilized and turned into plants, and you can still see the structure of the buildings in the distance, which is really awesome. After an investigation team goes quiet, Lendon, I think his name's Lendon, it might be Lenad, but Lendon gets suspicious. Just then, some big bird monsters attack. They are pretty metallic, but they can be killed by being shot. It is discovered after the attack humans have been gone for about 19,200 years, so we'll round up and say 20,000 years. Turns out that the fog on the planet is not fog after all. It's actually pollen produced by the plants, by the trees. The only way to get rid of the fog is to burn down the entire forest, which is going to be difficult considering it's basically metal. Lenad now wants to retreat from Earth, gather resources while waiting on the moon, and then leave the planet entirely and leave the solar system. Haruo confronts him about this, saying that this is their entire planet and they can't give up on it twice. The Servum injured and killed as many as 50 people, making retreat the only logical solution. Mephthes brings up the point that although retreat is logical, it's impractical. The groups are split over such a large area because they're waiting to attack Godzilla. It would mean everyone has to reconvene at one central point before leaving the planet. The evacuation starts because Lendon's just like, screw it. And I know I keep bouncing back between the names Lendon and Lenad. It's just because I really honestly don't remember this character's name. He's not a bad character. I actually like his kind of character motivations, how he's like, I really want to be the hero, I want to take over, I want to rule the world someday, but I'll do it as a nice, good, charismatic leader should. I'm not going to be like a dictator or anything. He's like, I just want to be a cool guy. I want to be a hotshot just like my heroes. And Haruo's like, yeah, you're such a little kid in the heart. You really got to focus on just killing Godzilla here, guy. Let's not focus on afterward. Let's focus on just getting it done for now. And then Lenad's just like, you know, let's abandon the planet because I don't want to deal with confrontation. And also, it's logical because a lot of our people died. And Haruo's like, hey, you big idiot. And then Lenad's like, I am a big idiot, and saves Haruo. Actually, I genuinely do think he's a cool character. He's not too memorable in the long scheme of things. You got Haruo. Haruo and Martin are honestly the only characters I actually really like in this movie. I think Mephthes is okay, and Lendon or Lenad, whatever his name is not bad either. But overall, I really only do like Haruo, and Martin is pretty cool as well. Adam's got some cool moments in here, but Adam really doesn't do much in this movie. And for some of you, you don't even know who I'm talking about because this movie focuses so centrally on Haruo that you really don't even get time to know the other characters' names. Anyways, the evacuation starts but requires the movement of all ships through the Terasawa Pass. This is where Godzilla lives, and this starts to create fear amongst the people while evacuating. Mephthes warns Haruo that Earth's Godzilla's home now. They showed up and started dropping bombs looking to pick a fight, and now Godzilla's gonna bring it to him. Another reference to Kong Skull Island, interesting enough. Actually, those aren't the words he uses, but still, that's the basic speech he gives. He claims Godzilla has received the message, aka the message to fight, and will soon be searching for humanity in order to make them pay. He says that this is part of the Exif's legend, and the destruction of worlds because of large creatures like Godzilla isn't an uncommon thing in the large grand universe. Mephthes says Godzilla is divine anger, and he will make humanity pay for their creations and actions until they learn their lesson to stop trying to play God. I really don't know what the hell Mephthes is talking about, because the humans don't do too much evil stuff in this timeline that we know of. You know, they just live out their normal lives blowing nukes up like we do in our world, so I guess he could be talking about that. This could be a reference to the creation of Hedorah in this universe, who we'll get into in another video, but Hedorah basically was some sort of bioweapon created by humanity. Or this could be a new origins for Godzilla that we don't quite know of, where Godzilla was also a bioweapon engineered. Or this could be the old origins of Godzilla, in which Godzilla is created due to humanity's errors, blowing up nukes and turning him from a radiated dinosaur into Godzilla. That could also be what they're talking about. I don't really know. I hope we get an answer next movie about if Godzilla was a Godzilla before turning into Godzilla. Or it could just be the old school 54 origins, where Godzilla's in the ocean, gets hit by a nuke, and it's like, hey, that didn't feel good, and so he just shows up and starts killing people. I really do not know. Just then, Godzilla appears in the Terasawa Pass. Due to the Servum's attack, the shuttle Haruo, Mephthes, Lendon, and Yuko are in cannot evade in time. Haruo runs off from the main ship, jumping into an attack craft to fight Godzilla head-on. The ship crashes and explodes while people are evacuating. Haruo fights Godzilla in a speeder. Godzilla isn't attacking Haruo, meaning the data that Haruo is looking for isn't being collected. They don't know which organ is producing this shield. Lenad, whose real name might be Lendon, again, I really don't know, I don't remember, then appears to retreat to leave Haruo to die. It's a really cool mislead, and the first time I saw it, I was really like, oh, I can't believe he'd do that. Haruo goes to sacrifice himself so Martin can collect data needed to kill Godzilla. Last second, Haruo pulls away because Lendon shows up in a tank and starts bombing Godzilla as well. Lendon sacrifices himself in return for Haruo so Haruo can live on. His last words are, "This planet can go to hell," which is awesome. I absolutely love that. That's another thing. This character, his sacrifice and his last words, just really all together, I like the character due to those kinds of things. Godzilla blows him up with the atomic breath, and then Godzilla heads out. We don't really know where he goes. He kind of just walks away into the valley. Someone else is put in charge. We don't quite know who yet, especially because the Netflix subtitles don't appear on this scene. It's just blank. He is ordered to do whatever he can to save lives. The data reveals that the shield is generated from Godzilla's central dorsal fin, which is a cool use of the dorsal fins. Shin Godzilla is really the only other movie to actually have a logical explanation for why Godzilla has these dorsal fins. We get it from all the other movies. He charges up his atomic breath using these, but Shin Godzilla, you know that they're a ventilation system for his blood inside of him that heats up due to the nuclear fission inside of his body. In this movie, we know that they generate the shield that protects his body and helps him regenerate his skin. And really, other than that, we don't ever get a good explanation for why he has these things. So it turns out that Mephes was put in charge, but as a result of his religion scripture, he turns down the responsibility. It is the Exif creed that people are created for certain reasons. He believes that Haruo's reason is to destroy Godzilla and lead people, humanity, and the Exif to Sanctuary, and the other alien race that has a stupid name that I don't want to try and pronounce. Because of this, Haruo is put in charge. Haruo orders an attack on Godzilla. Haruo sets traps in the valley and plans to lure Godzilla into a dense area and trap him. Then they will kill him. Godzilla is attacked by manned gliders, and he mainly only uses the atomic breath to defend against them. The servums interrupt the attack, killing a fair amount of people, and Haruo orders the large landing ships to go distract Godzilla in order to pull Godzilla further into the valley. I think this is kind of a big mistake on Haruo's part because that's super reckless, and they call that out in the movie, and he kind of throws one back at Adam, who calls him out on that. It's like, hey, I thought Earth was our home. That's where humanity came from, right? We have no reason to leave. If all the ships are shot down, we're already home. Which is basically him being like, hey, screw you guys who want to leave. I hate you. Let's go kill Godzilla because I want to. It kind of makes him a selfish character. I hope they do something with that in the next movie where they have him learn a lesson. Godzilla is hit with thermobaric bombs which get his attention. Adam's ship is shot down, but Adam escapes in time, and Godzilla falls into the valley. Now he is drawn into the trap area. Godzilla walks in the trap point and bombs go off and he gets stuck in rocks. Godzilla is bombarded with tons of tanks and missiles and everything that you could think of. The dorsal fin is shot off, and as it's regenerating, Haruo takes a mech into battle. The other power suits all follow him. They shoot EMPs into Godzilla's body, which disrupt the frequency that his body emits. His body emits some sort of sound that creates this shield, and if they can disrupt that and amplify it, his body will drop the shield permanently. The dorsal fin fails to regrow. Godzilla tries to use his atomic breath, but because of the EMPs amplifying the noise inside of his body, the detonation of the atomic breath happens internally and Godzilla explodes just like in GMK. Earth is saved and Haruo has survived. It's a total victory, right? Well, sort of, until Martin discovers that this Godzilla really didn't have anything different with the last Godzilla that they saw 20,000 years ago, meaning this is probably a new Godzilla, because the old one will have certainly changed after 20,000 years, assuming it's still alive. Haruo gets all cocky, being like, yeah, whatever, we took down one Godzilla, we can do it again. Then suddenly a mountain erupts, Godzilla arises from it. This Godzilla, the real Godzilla from the beginning of the movie, is 300 meters and rising compared to the 50 meters of the Godzilla we saw previously in the movie. He's over 100,000 tons. Mephes reveals that this is the true incarnation of death and destruction. He calls it the King of Destruction. This is destiny. This was always going to happen according to Mephes. I think this is who Mephes meant Haruo is destined to destroy. Haruo will lead to the death of this Godzilla. I think that's truly what Mephes believes. Haruo orders an immediate evacuation of Earth. Godzilla roars down multiple landing ships, which is absolutely awesome. This Godzilla has some of the coolest abilities. He's got the atomic breath of course, but he also has this sonic wave that he can shoot out of his mouth that just disrupts everything and explodes stuff that come into contact with it. It's basically a video game superpower. Godzilla's tail then blows up a forest and kills almost every single human on the surface. This happens for multiple reasons. Number one, Godzilla's tail is so big when he swings it, it creates a shockwave. And number two, there's theories online, and I haven't been able to find true confirmation of this, but there's theories online that Godzilla's tail, the reason it explodes so much of the land around it, is because it can interact with the land, because Godzilla is sort of closely related to the plants on this new Earth, meaning when he swings his tail over them, they kind of just erupt because he can manipulate the material in the atmosphere. Haruo is about to die, and then the credits roll. That's just where we're left off. And the first time I saw that, I was literally so like, no, they can't do this, and then it just ends, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this, you've got to be kidding me. I have to wait for the next one to find out if he's alive, but it's okay, we know he's alive because in the after credit scene, Haruo wakes up to see a native girl who has rescued him. That's the end of the movie for good. I don't think it's the best Godzilla movie. I actually wouldn't put it in my top 15 list even, maybe. Actually, it might be like 15 or around the bottom half of the top list, but it definitely isn't one of the best Godzilla movies. However, I still do think this is a solid entry in the series. Now, about Godzilla's design, a lot of people have been saying, oh, it's just a ripoff of the 2014 design. I personally like this design a little bit more than the 2014 design for a couple reasons. Number one, the eyes are bigger. Number two, I think he's generally more well-proportioned. I don't think he looks as fat as the 2014 Godzilla looked, and I just think he generally looks more appealing. I also love the beard spike on the full-grown Godzilla and just how jagged he looks. I would love to see this design realized in full live action. The things that I dislike about it are the blue nature of the original Godzilla's color, the baby Godzilla that we see throughout the movie. I don't really think he looks all that interesting. He's just kind of this dark blue color, and it's just kind of boring to look at. The other Godzilla, we never actually see what he looks like. He's covered in dirt the whole movie when we see him, so he's just brown, which is kind of boring to look at. I would prefer if he went back to like his gray or black look for next movie. I think that always looks better on film, but this is an anime. Maybe they decided that the black didn't look good, so they went away with it. I'm not totally sure. As for the human storyline in this movie, I think it's pretty good. I think that Haruo is a really interesting main character. I'm not too familiar with anime, so I'm not used to the whole, archetype of, you killed my family, I'm gonna take you down, that's popularized in Attack on Titan. I think Haruo is a pretty cool character. As for the other characters, however, I think Martin's the only one with a true personality. Mephies is alright. I do enjoy Mephies' whole, overly religious angle, but other than that, we really don't know anything about any of the other characters. We know that Yuko likes Haruo because she wants to be strong like she thinks he is, and we know that Adam is a nice guy, and we know that Lendon wanted to be a hero. We really don't know anything about the characters in this movie other than Haruo, so I really only like Haruo, and as I said, Martin I think is a good character, but to be honest, I think only Haruo is going to stick with me for a while, and I look forward to seeing him in the sequel. However, I would say that this is definitely not one of the top casts you're going to get in a Godzilla movie. This is definitely not one of the top set of characters you're going to get in a Godzilla movie. They're ultimately forgettable characters outside of the main character, which is okay because it's a central story around him, not an ensemble cast like Shin Godzilla, but I don't like these characters as much as I like, say, Shin Godzilla or 2014. As for kaiju stuff in this movie, it's good, but it's not great. I could have done with more of it. We don't see too much of Godzilla doing anything other than shooting his atomic breath, which doesn't feel that far out of line with what we've been seeing in the past. I just would have liked to see him do a little bit more. He doesn't even feel like he moves half the time he's on screen. He kind of just stands there. So I would have liked to see him do a little bit more. I get that he's so big that he can't do too much, but until we finally get to see the real Godzilla in the last 4 minutes of the movie, we don't get too much of Godzilla doing anything. Then that Godzilla actually does stuff. He moves a lot. He blows stuff up. He actually has a really different, interesting looking design compared to the one that came before him. I don't know, he just has more personality to him too, and his expressions and everything, so I think that I can get behind a full movie about this Godzilla more than I can get behind this movie itself. Other than that, the Servum didn't really do much, and I don't really have anything to say about the other kaiju because they weren't in the movie other than in silhouette, which is disappointing to say the least. I would have enjoyed a full movie of the timeline of the Monster Planet history leading up to humans evacuating Earth. Next movie, I would have appreciated to pick up humans coming back to Earth after their subspace navigation fails and everyone dies on that planet. Basically, this is what I would have as the sequel in the trilogy. Actually, I wouldn't even have it be a trilogy. I would have it be like a 4-parter because I definitely think you need the backstory, and I think it would be better if it was told outside of just news flashbacks at the start of this movie. The effects in this movie, do I really want to call it effects? Because it's not. It's animation. It's CGI animation, so I guess effects, but this feels like a mixture of CGI and classic hand-drawn animation. I think it's pretty good. I wouldn't say that they're like outstanding effects. I can really appreciate the groundbreaking nature of them. I wouldn't even say they're like better than the live action stuff from the 60s because it's animation. It's not as visually appealing. That just comes with the genre. I'm not going to knock the movie because it's a genre. I'm going to knock the movie because it was a boring movie. It wasn't, but you get what I'm saying. That's the kind of thing that I ding it for. So I'm not going to ding it for the animation. I personally don't like anime as much as I like live action stuff. So as for effects, I'm really not going to judge it on effects, which just kind of makes this portion of the video worthless, but whatever, I covered it in all the other ones. I always cover the effects. Music. The music in this movie, it's growing on me. It is growing on me. There is some music in this movie that I absolutely find to be amazing. Godzilla's main theme's pretty awesome. Anytime we get a military march is super cool. Some of the battle themes are alright. However, whenever we get techno music, it really takes me out of it. I don't like the techno stuff. I'm not about that life. I don't think the composer Hattori really brings it as much as, say, our composer from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla does. However, I do think this is his best work in the franchise, so I will commend him for that. The plot was okay. It's not too generic. A lot of people say, oh, it's a ripoff of Interstellar. Well, guess what, suckers? I've never seen Interstellar, so I can appreciate this movie on its own. So yeah, I thought the plot was pretty interesting, and I really like some of the decisions they made with the aliens. I think this is the most original alien storyline we've ever had in a Godzilla movie, and I like a lot of the elements of it. I do. I think it's a good movie. Overall, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'm not going to say this is the best Godzilla movie ever. I mean, I definitely, like I said, I'm not going to pretend that I thought it was amazing just for the sake of, I don't know, pretending that it was amazing. I just thought it was a good movie. I definitely would watch it again, and I have watched it multiple times, but ultimately, this isn't going to be one that I go back to every couple of months like I do with some of the other ones, because this one's just not as good as some of the other ones. I would much rather watch Godzilla vs. King Kong, or Shin Godzilla, or 1954 Godzilla. I wouldn't put this one on the list of, like, gotta watch it again immediately. And even when I watched it the first day, I was like, well, I should probably watch it again because I have reviews to make. But ultimately, it's a good movie. I just don't really feel too much need to watch it too many times. I do enjoy watching it. Every time I watch it, I have a good time with it. But it's just not one of the standouts for me, which is okay. It doesn't need to be. A lot of people are going to ding this movie because it is really the big setup for the trilogy. However, I appreciate world building. I appreciate what they did in this movie. I love the fact that we're setting up for a sequel. I love that Kong Skull Island was setting up for Godzilla vs. Kong half the time. I always appreciate that in movies. I love world building. I don't often understand the complaint about, oh, this was just a big trailer for another movie, because, like, first of all, no, it wasn't. It clearly wasn't. It can stand on its own. Second of all, so what? You know, we're gonna get that sequel eventually, and especially with this in an anime format. Anime often does this, in my experience anyways. It's build up for a sequel or for a next episode or something along those lines. This is considered a series. Even Netflix labels it as Godzilla the series, so I'm totally fine with this being an extended first episode, an extended pilot that just leaves us on a pretty interesting, fascinating cliffhanger, and I appreciate the setup for the sequel, so I don't have any problems with that. So there you go, guys. That's my review for Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. Like I said earlier, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. It's a good movie. I'd say go check it out at least once if you're a Godzilla fan. It's free on Netflix, assuming you have Netflix, so it's worth it. It's a very experimental film, and I appreciate this dive into a new genre and this attempt to do something original in the Godzilla franchise. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See y'all next time. D-Man, out.